If you ever suspect that your PC's power supply might be fried because your system's no longer turning on, here's how you can test it with just a simple paperclip, using what I call the jumpstart/hotwire method. In order to test this unit with that paperclip, the first thing you're going to want to do is disconnect it from power, then unplug your 24-pin and CPU power cables. Then you're going to want to take your paperclip and turn it into this U shape. Then with the 24-pin that we just disconnected with the clip on top, we're going to locate the 3rd and 4th pin in the top row and insert our paperclip into those two particular pins, which is designed to trick our power supply to think a motherboard's connected and a power switch is being pressed, allowing us to isolate this power supply from the rest of the components to test and make sure it's actually working, and that nothing else happens to be stopping us. So with that paperclip connected, all we got to do is connect power, then locate the power switch on the back of the power supply, and turn that on. And if our power supply fan turns on, that means we're at least getting power, which means likely your power supply is just fine. But if it doesn't turn on, that thing's probably completely fried. This can be super helpful information, but one thing that this test doesn't tell us is if we're getting the right amount of voltage. Because even if your power supply is getting power to turn on, it doesn't mean it's enough voltage or the right voltage for your motherboard to actually fire up, which can cause that same unresponsive power button. Fortunately, you can test this using a multimeter and checking the voltages on each of the pins. You should be able to check the 3.3, 5 volt, and 12 volt rails. And this can actually be done for all your connections, including your CPU connectors and PCIe cables if you happen to have any. But if you don't want to use the paperclip and multimeter method and you work on computers a lot, I'd highly recommend picking up a Thermaltake Dr. Power 3 power supply tester. It basically does the same thing as the paperclip, allowing us to go ahead and dry fire our power supply to make sure it turns on. If it does, it'll go ahead and read out the voltage on all of the connectors, including our 24 pins 12 volt, 5 volt, and 3.3 volt rail. We can also check our CPU connector, our PCIe connectors, Molex, SATA, and even the new 12+4 pin connector, all built into a very easy to use device. It's definitely not necessary because you can do the same thing with a paperclip and multimeter, but it is pretty nice to use and a lot simpler. The biggest limitation of these two tools is that it doesn't load test, which means you can't test for things like spikes in power or how well the overcurrent protection is actually working, which can sometimes throw weird power errors in the middle of a game. But for the majority of power supply issues that I typically see on a daily basis, they work or they don't work, and you can usually rule that out with the Dr. Power 3 power supply tester or the paperclip method.